Now, I mentioned this a few moments ago, and it's something which has certainly got strong opinions from both sides evoked. In a bid to crack down on drink driving, Staffordshire Police have been naming and shaming offenders charged with this on Twitter. Now, a solicitor who helped the rich and the famous get off motoring charges, Nick Freeman, has called for the Staffordshire Police Commissioner Matthew Ellis to stand down because he says this is plain wrong. Well, you'll hear from Nick Freeman shortly, but first, this is what Matthew Ellis had to say to Dean Pepple about it.
What happened to this innocent until proven guilty business then?
Well, I think it's a bit more straightforward than that. At the end of the day, if you're over the limit and you're markedly over the limit and you admit it, then you've committed an offence which is drink driving.
There could be a reason for it, though. People take drugs. They may not be aware of the impact that if they've got an illness or something like that it's had, if they'd had a couple of glasses of sherry or something. We're never quite sure of the full picture till it's gone to court.
Well, let me put it this way. There is great common sense being used by the police. I, for one, and I think the vast majority of people would agree with me, that in the very, very tiny risk and tiny number of times that a clear over-the-limit reading and a significant over-the-limit reading falls out at the last hurdle. I think it's very, very small numbers.
But why drink driving?
If it saves one life, then that's well worth it, I think.
But why drink driving? Why not tweet the names of other alleged offenders?
Other alleged offenders, people who have been charged, it's a matter of public record, by the way. Don't forget that this isn't displaying something that isn't already available relatively easily. This is just simply putting it in one place to make a point, to try and discourage other people who might drink and drive from doing so.
But do you think this will actually reduce the number of drink drivers?
Yes. And I'm delighted that in the last 24 hours, the survey has been done, which is actually quite a large number of people who've ordered it, who've actually answered it. 60% of people have said it has made them think, and it has now made them think very clearly that they're better off not drinking anything.
Well, that was Matthew Ellis talking to Dean Pepple about the situation. Now, a man known as Mr. Loophole, a man who's got both Alex Ferguson and Wayne Rooney off speeding offences, is solicitor Nick Freeman. And he joins you now. Nick, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Why would you like the police commissioner to hang up his hat?
Well, he seems to be showing a scant misunderstanding of the law. He said on Staffordshire, BBC Stoke, that we had one of the lowest levels of drink driving, whereas in fact we have the highest. He then went on to say that he thought the level was 35. In fact, it's 80. And he then went on and stated that in his view, no one will be named where there is any doubt. So in other words, once someone is charged, in his view, there's no doubt, and it's perfectly reasonable to name them. He is completely ignoring the presumption of innocence, and I applaud any proper attempts to prevent people from drink driving, but they must do so within the spirit of the law, and they must consider the morality of the situation. Why not name and shame people after they've been convicted? And however small the number are who are acquitted, there is a significant number of people who are actually acquitted, and we must, and rightly so, name and shame them at the appropriate time. What I would say to Matthew Ellis is, apart from being mistaken about the matters that I've alluded to, he's jumping too early, and he's obviously very enthusiastic to try and deal with this problem, but he needs to consider actually what the legal position is, and in my view he's ignoring it, and he's naming and shaming people who may well be acquitted.
It's not illegal though, is it? It's not a form of sub judice to name those who are undergoing a trial.
No,
for it.
It isn't illegal at all, and as you've rightly pointed out, why not name and shame everybody who's charged with a criminal offence? We're not talking about a situation where there's any public interest involved here. We're not talking about a serial rapist who's been arrested and we want people to come forward. We're simply talking about people who are charged with a serious road traffic offence, and what we want the public to do is, well, what we want these defendants to experience is they need to be named and they need to be shamed, irrespective of guilt. And that for me in our society is extremely worrying. And it's more worrying when the person who announces that particular theory clearly misunderstands what the law is.
I take your point, Nick, but also that point that was made by Matthew Ellis that, if you have been drink driving, it's a pretty binary judgment, isn't it? Because you've either blown over the limit or you haven't. So whatever the reasoning behind the fact that you've done it, you're only going to be charged with it if you were over the limit and behind the wheel.
Well, but that, of course, doesn't mean to say you're guilty. I mean, if only it were that simple. If only he was right, and yes, you're driving, and yes, you're over the limit. I mean, what happens if the machine's wrong? What happens if the machine isn't working? What happens if it's contaminated with acetone and it provides a false reading? According to him, it will be perfectly appropriate to name and shame that person.
Is that not a fractional number of cases, though, surely?
It's a small percentage. But why is it necessary? What we want to do is to disincentivize people from drink driving, and this isn't the right way of doing so. And we're encouraging, in my view, vigilante conduct. By naming and shaming, we're encouraging the members of the public to react adversely to the people who've been named and shamed. And as I say, some of these people will undoubtedly be acquitted. Not all of them, might be a small percentage, but some of them. And in relation to those people, it's wholly wrong. And I can't see why his enthusiasm is disadvantaged if he waits until they're convicted.
You mentioned his factual errors. Now, it is unfortunate for someone in his position to get the figure wrong on something like this, but we all have bad days. Sometimes government ministers make mistakes in the statistics they quote. It doesn't make us incompetent. You mentioned that you wanted someone in the post that is keen and passionate about stamping down on drink driving. He's got a great deal of enthusiasm. If he resigns, as you suggest he should, maybe a man with different priorities or woman with different priorities might get into the post and not be quite so concerned with the issue.
Well, once they raise their head above the parapet, it's very important that they get... These are basic facts that he's wrong on. These aren't sort of secretive facts. I imagine most members of the public would actually know what the drink driving level is and the fact that in the EU country we're the highest level. So these aren't sort of complex facts, and he's announcing on radio what the limit is. He's wrong. He's saying it's the lowest level, it's the highest level. And more importantly than that, he's totally ignoring a very pivotal presumption that we have in our English legal system. Now, I'm not doubting his enthusiasm, and I'm not suggesting it's misplaced, but it must be important that if somebody is going to occupy that post, they get a grasp of these very elementary facts before they say this is what we're going to do, because the public will lose confidence very quickly if they realise that the person who's espousing these views is factually incorrect in such a fundamental manner.
Nick, just finally, you are a man who will have got inside the minds and know the motivations, conscious or otherwise, of many people who've drink-driven. From that perspective, what would you propose as an effective way to try and clamp down on the numbers of people that do this?
To deter people from doing it.
That's right,
I think
yeah.
we need a much larger police presence on the road. I think the law needs to be changed so that the police can randomly breathalyse people. At the moment they can't. They can only do so under limited grounds. The law needs to be changed, and our level's too high. It needs to be brought down. But at this time of year, surely we need police on the roads, we need roadblocks, and we need to afford the police the opportunity of random breath testing. That would deter people massively, because they would know then, I don't need an accident, I don't need to commit a moving traffic offence, and the officer doesn't need to suspect alcohol. He can breathalyse me just because he wants to, and I think that would provide a massive deterrent, which at the moment doesn't exist.
Nick, thanks very much for taking the time this evening.
Thank you, Richard.
Nick Freeman, solicitor there, a man known as Mr. Loophole for the number of people, some of them particularly high profile, who he's got off various driving offences, but sticking by his call for the Police Commissioner of Staffordshire to resign after his comments.